Hey there, this is David Angel, and this is episode 2 of the Opportune Conflict, where I take a little nugget or idea from conflict resolution or decision making and sort of try and make that more easy to digest and relatable to our everyday lives. Now, the topic of today isn't going to be exactly that unfamiliar to most of us, and so it's not going to be as technical as some other ones might be, but it's really around the idea of decision making in lose-lose scenarios. Or, in other words, what can we do when all of our options sort of suck? And sometimes really suck. Um, and I say that because really we are the diviners of value for our own conflicts and for our own situations. And so to one person, something might seem like it's small potatoes, while to other people it might be the mountain that can never be climbed. And as I was thinking about doing this little episode, I was thinking, what would be a scenario that I could see it being just like that? And for me, it was sort of like the idea of going to a restaurant, really wanting that one favorite dish they have, and then finding out they're out, and having to settle for something else that probably tastes good, but just, wasn't that thing I was there for. It doesn't really suck, but at the same time, that might not matter to most people, but if I was having a really bad day and I was wanting to just indulge and eat my feelings by having that one thing that would perk my day up because I made it through it and they didn't have it, yeah, it's gonna be a lot more of an important thing for me than it might seem like it should to others. Anyhow, the reason I use that as an example is because we have the power to create and destroy value for outcomes. There is a sense that there is reality, and then there is the reality that we ascribe value to. Because in any scenario, there's the facts, there's the descriptive analysis of the world that tells us how the world truly is, and then there are the judgments that we make on whether or not something is good or bad. And that's entirely up to us, because in that extent, we create or destroy value just as much as the circumstances around us or the outcomes that happen to us. And so when we're in a situation that requires us to make a decision where all our options seem to be lose-lose, meaning that we are going to lose value no matter what we do or don't do, we do have the option still of taking some action to either alleviate some of the pain of the options we might have, or creating value into them that might not otherwise exist. And so a good example might be if, let's go with a work analogy. We have two options sometimes if we have a job we hate. We keep working it because we've got to pay our bills. There's not really much of a choice perhaps in that. Or we just up and quit. And if it's a really bad situation, what tends to happen when we're surrounded by lose-lose scenarios, when we're stuck between the rock and the hard place, all we focus on sometimes is that rock or hard place. Do we keep suffering through working, or do we just quit? And so the next step really is, once we realize that we can create or destroy value in terms of how we perceive and judge our conflicts and our problems, we can also then realize that sometimes we get tunnel vision and think of our scenarios as being lose-lose, or a rock and a hard place, or binary in that respect. When in reality, we might have a lot more losing scenarios we can indulge ourselves in. And yeah, sometimes it's not really helpful to think, yeah, I've got so many ways that this can all go poorly for me. However, in coming to understand our situation and coming to understand the reality that is without our judgment applied to it, our descriptive analysis of the world, by coming to understand the situation we are in, we are able to open our eyes a little bit more. We're able to escape from the tunnel and see a broader range of options. And sometimes some of those options might not be that terrible. And in some situations, yeah, we can actually turn a lose-lose situation into a potential win by having worked hard at it long enough, or having persevered long enough, or reframed our own perspective of what happened. A good example might be if you don't know what to do and you flip a coin and you just take whatever decision that coin tells you and it sucks majorly, you might experience a lot more regret over not having done anything at all. You've created less value, you've destroyed more value by an action you took than potentially having done something else. And so in that regards, if you know that you truly are in a lose-lose situation, that there really are no great options for you, knowing that you've done the best you could do, that you exercised all the options and actions that you had at hand in the context within which you were put, or moving through, or persevering through, that in its own regard can create a sense of self-resiliency. It can create more value for your sense of self moving forward. Now, I will say there's a lot of good resources for this in terms of coping with bad situations. And if you're in a really bad one, I would definitely recommend, reaching out to a professional. A lot of psychology deals with this in a lot more depth than I am willing to or going to get into, because I am not a licensed clinical social worker or therapist, and I just wanted to talk about this in a way that opens your options for additional help. And so that could be one of your options or solutions too. You take the bad situation of the past and you can still act upon it in the future. In most scenarios, you can still reframe, redirect, and grow from lose-lose scenarios. It's how we choose to grow the value in the present and the future. And even looking back, we can reframe a bad experience to either become more benign or potentially that learning opportunity that becomes a source of strength for us in the future. And not all of them are going to be that rose-tinted glasses kind of a perspective. There will be bad situations that we can't get around. And I want to acknowledge that, because accepting the notion that this is the situation you are in, and then analyzing it and coming to know what your options are, is that other part of the step. Realizing you can create value out of bad situations potentially, and that you can expand the range of options you might have, is in itself empowering, even when the situation feels like it is a losing situation from all angles and all sides. Now, that all being said is easier said than done. In the first episode, I touched on the fact that, sometimes when we're in the middle of a conflict, we do get that tunnel vision. We feel the world close in on us, and we find it hard to step outside of our own selves to analyze what is going on. And so this, I guess, has a very similar lesson to the first episode of keeping in mind that when you're in a losing situation, that you do have some options for your own self-autonomy and for your own decisions to be made. How you frame that to yourself can become a source of value as well. And I go into some of the other forms of what are the basic needs that people have. And, that control over self-growth, that control over self-autonomy are some needs that we do have. And so again, going back to this notion that how can we create value? If we think about our true goals in a conflict or in a problem situation, if we evaluate what our actual needs are, we can sometimes find that there are other ways in which we can gain value from a lose-lose kind of a situation. For example, the ability to talk to a good friend about a problem, the ability to feel that bond of a relationship, of friendship, is something that can be derived from a bad situation. I'm not saying that's always a great thing per se, but I'm just saying there are ways that we can expand outside of the situation itself. The lose-lose scenario that comes to mind, whatever that might be for you, does not exist within a bubble. And so that's probably the third point or the fourth point at this time I'll probably bring up, which is to keep in mind that any losing scenario that we might be entering into exists outside of that context as well. So next time you're in a situation that seems like all your options sort of suck, keep these ideas in mind. You can accept the situation for what it is. And accepting a situation for what it is doesn't mean you have to be happy with it either. You can accept the facts And then once you accept the facts, you can try and see what other options might you have? What other things might you be able to do to create value for yourself, or at least mitigate the loss of value? And then what other ways outside of this losing scenario can you make things better for yourself? And it doesn't necessarily mean that making things better for yourself outside of a lose-lose situation compensates for the entirety of that losing scenario. But it's something that you can do for yourself to make it suck less or improve upon it in outside contexts. So, instead of quitting your job or suffering through it, does your job offer paid college tuition if you need to get a diploma for that next promotion or for a better job? Because, changing jobs is one of the ways that people increase their salary the most. And even if you're going through and there's a period of toughness, we are forward-thinking, future-thinking creatures. And so being able to persevere sometimes, yeah, it might suck in the present, but if you're pursuing an active goal of the future, that too can create a sense of resiliency as well. And so just keep those thoughts in mind, that when you're in that lose-lose scenario, when you're in a situation where your options all seem like they suck, you do have some things you can do. You do have some control over the situation usually. And I hope this helps to be able to think about it. Anyhow, this is where I'm going to end episode 2 here. If you have any comments or would like me to touch upon something else, go ahead and reach out to me, and I'm happy to think about future episode ideas. Thanks, take care, and bye.